Well, hi there. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cooke, and this time of year is always special for those of us here at Telile 24/7. For starters, it's the second anniversary of the show. But it's also the 2-year anniversary of a week-long training seminar that involved Telile and other community stations from across the country. It took place in Wakefield, Quebec in January 2020. Yes, just before the pandemic. And it featured community stations all the way around Canada taking part in the Local Journalism Initiative. It's sponsored by the Canadian Association of Community Television Users and Stations, or CACTUS for short. And it wasn't just Telile that learned how to do programming like Telile 24/7, Roundtable, and Notre Côté. Other community stations around Canada took part, and we're going to bring back a member of one of those LJI community stations right now. Her name is Vicki Hogarth. In a previous life, she was doing red carpet coverage and award shows and entertainment-style features on everybody from Justin Timberlake and Keira Knightley to Donald Trump himself. But now she is the news host and producer for CHCO-TV, that stands for Charlotte County Television in southwestern New Brunswick. We brought back Vicki to talk about her experiences in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, but also to talk a little bit about what we've been doing at Telile 24/7 and how that lines up with what the other LJI stations across the country have been up to. So, let's welcome back our friend Vicki Hogarth from CHCO-TV in St. Andrews, New Brunswick. Vicki, welcome back to Telile 24/7, and thank you for joining me for another Cross the Maritimes chat here.
Hi, Adam. It's nice to see you again. It's nice to have another chance to catch up.
Well, that's just it. I mean, other people have video chats just privately to themselves. We do our video chats in front of an audience watching at home
Why
on
not?
TV. Or on YouTube for that matter. So we're just crazy that way. Maybe we're a little egomaniacal. You never know.
You never know. It says a lot about us that we went into television, right?
That's one of the things I wanted to ask you about actually with this round because you and I each have our reasons that we're doing this right now. But how did you want to get into television or broadcasting in the first place? I mean, you've done everything from hitting the red carpets and talking to celebrities in your previous life to talking to municipal leaders right now with CHCO TV. But what made young Vicki think I'd like to be on TV and I'd like to be an interviewer and a broadcaster?
Oh my gosh. Well, young Vicky did not want to get in television. Young
Really?
Vicky was really obsessed with, I was a teenager in the 90s. So all I wanted to do was work for magazines, and I did. And that's actually like how I started my career was that's how I ended up interviewing so many celebrities, was working at magazines, doing cover stories, working as an entertainment reporter, but always as a writer. And when I went to university, I did my degrees were in English. I did a BA and MA at McGill, and just thinking, okay, I want to be a writer. That's all I ever wanted to be. And obviously, writing is kind of the foundation for anything in journalism. So it actually really does feed into a television reporting career because you're writing your own material. And some people might be good on TV, but if you also have that skill to write as well, it can take you far. But with television, I mean, it kind of happened accidentally. And I think that there's that progression in the industry, right? Like when I was starting in magazines, you saw the online era really creeping up very fast. I think when I got my first job was in 2000, gosh, 3, the first big glossy magazine I worked at. And already at that point in time, the internet was like, I mean, it was happening, but websites really weren't yet a big thing, but very quickly they did become that. And with websites becoming a thing, I eventually moved over to a men's magazine that was online just so I could learn the era. And I was still doing entertainment at that time. I was an entertainment editor.
Was that the magazine where you interviewed Donald Trump?
Yes, that was cool. It was weirdly, it was based in Montreal, but it was owned by Fox News, which is so weird. People think it's crazy
Wow.
that I worked for Fox. It was called AskMen.com, but it was just one of the many things that Rupert Murdoch owns, I guess. So I worked there for a couple years, but it had a big readership of like 18 million unique readers a month. So I learned a lot about online from that place. And we did have video components where you realize, like, if you integrate video into articles, They did a lot better. They performed a lot better. Not that I was necessarily in a lot of them. Sometimes you would be. But I think with, I've always been open to the idea of journalism. Like, you have to follow the curve of where things are going, right? I really loved magazines, but there was a part of me that knew, okay, I've got to figure out where I fit into the future of this. If I want to be a journalist that is, still hireable, you've got to follow the trends of the industry as well. And then when I was working in Toronto, I was doing both magazine and online different work. And I'm not going to say the name of the reality show is on. I was on a reality show in Toronto. But people, I don't know, when this sounds ridiculous, but TV kind of, people decide you can do something and you're like, no. I know, there were a couple of times when I was like, people were like, you should do this. Same with that reality show. It wasn't my audition tape. It was somebody else's. And they're like, no, we like her. And it's like, okay, so I did that a little bit. Then I moved here just to be closer to my family in New Brunswick. And there turned out to be this TV station I didn't know there was. I remember calling home to St. Andrews when I was in Toronto and hearing my family say, oh, we got to go because TV Bingo's on. I was like, TV Bingo's on? And like, yeah, and your friend Jay hosts it. And I was like, oh my God, it sounded so fun. That like our town was on TV. So when I got here, it kind of happened. I met Patrick, the station manager, who's like now my husband. And he met me in a St. Patrick's Day parade, and someone said, we need a journalist to interview the people in the parade. And someone said, oh, Vicki's a journalist. So they called me over and I just interviewed everyone, and he was so impressed. And I was like, well, this is what I do for a living. And that's how I started working here. Actually, it was kind of a funny thing that, like, journalism, that just shows you that, you maybe don't think you're right for television, but it can be, if you have the skills to be a journalist, you can translate that into different mediums. So television was by far not my first choice as a young person of the platform I wanted to be on, but it kind of, and you grow more comfortable with it. I think I just always thought maybe TV makes you too performative. I think that's what I thought. And I preferred the idea of like sitting at home, like really coming up with what I wanted to say, not worried about like performing it in a way. But just working at a place like this has given me a totally different perspective on television. And I think that so many people do get a lot of their information these days from video.
I wouldn't think, looking at your work on the CHCO news breaks or Southwest Magazine or any of the other things you're doing, like the COVID-19 briefings, that you are a latecomer to television and that you really had to work at developing yourself as being a television person. So it really is remarkable to see all that and to see how far you've come in just a short time, Vicki. So that's just wonderful.
Well, thank you. Yeah. How was you were in radio a long time, Adam. So tell me how you ended up doing TV.
Well, I was in radio for a long time. I actually worked for 5 years at a radio station here in Port Hawkesbury, Nova Scotia, called 1015 The Hawk. But when I was working at it, it was still an AM station. It was 1410 CIGO AM. I started working there before I finished up getting my journalism degree at King's College in Halifax. Worked there from 93 to 98. And then I wound up working for a couple of years at the weekly newspaper in Port Hawkesbury called The Reporter. And you were talking about working on different bylines. I put in a combined 12 years at The Reporter, and it's just kind of strange how these things go. There were some weeks that I would write as many as 14 or 15 stories and be taking photos as well, too. There was one deadline day on a Tuesday morning where I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning and wrote 14 600-word stories. By the time it was 12, they all made it in under deadline. I considered that issue of the newspaper my badge of honor, honestly. So how did I get into TV? Well, it was a long time coming because I got some TV training while I was getting my journalism degree at King's College. And I also got to do a little bit of TV work for another community television station in Richmond County, Cape Breton. It was actually in St. Peter's, not far from where I grew up. I was asked to be a teaching assistant for the communications, media, and television program that took place in the 11th grade of my alma mater, St. Peter's District High School. And I worked with a lot of really talented young people, and we put together a weekly show called The Neighborly News. It was a half-hour news broadcast, and it was really exciting for me because I'd never worked that extensively with putting together the visual aspect of the journalism that I did and the journalism that I was helping others to do as well too. So it was a whole new experience for me. Lay dormant for many years until Telile Community Television let me know that there was this new position that was opening up from something called the Canadian Association of Community Television Users and Stations, or CACTUS for short. That was my first full-time paid work in television, and 2 years later, celebrating that anniversary, I'm still here. And it took a long time, a long circuitous route for me to get there to being a television personality, but I think it's using a lot of different aspects of who I am and who I've been through my life. So I'm just excited to be here, and really glad that I've been able to have all this come full circle and be able to do the television work that I've looked at from a distance for a long time, but never really thought was the person that I was meant to be. So it's just kind of neat that you and I are redefining ourselves as we settle into our television work.
The fact that it's like the local journalism initiative, so you really are doing news on like a hyper local level. So I don't think TV, it doesn't feel as intimidating to me, because I know your station like ours is carried across Canada on Bell Satellite, so that's great.
Yes.
So you do have those. I think there are some, we have different pockets of people that watch us in like Red Deer, because I think they think we're like the Gilmore Girls. Our little town is pretty cute. But because it's like such a hyper local level, I feel like a real responsibility to my community, for what I'm reporting on, because it is my community. Like, I live here, it's a part of my life. So I really do feel, from coming at working at stuff on a national and international level, while there's a certain aspect of like, notoriety that comes with working at a really big publication, there's a different responsibility and, therefore a passion I have to work at something that is really so hyper local and so intertwined into my own life. And I think because of that, TV is not intimidating though, because people just know you in your town, right? Like, you go to the grocery store, like, you don't think of yourself as being like a TV personality because, I live here.
Yes.
It's no big deal. Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
strange for me as well too, and I have that experience sometimes myself. I mean, I was just shopping for winter boots just before Christmas time, and I had somebody come up and engage me in a lengthy conversation about a broadcast possibility that he was interested in for Telile, and it was just strange for me to think, well, I guess this is happening now.
Yeah.
And for a
Right?
long time, I had a little system that I would use. I was working pretty much 24/7, as the name of the show
Mhm.
implies, on journalism and being in a journalism life. And I would wear these red Converse sneakers with white laces. And I would say, these are my days off shoes. So if you see me in the grocery store or see me at the post office or out at a hockey game or anywhere wearing these red shoes, you know that I'm off limits for a while. I'm just out enjoying myself. So, maybe you could wait till I get back at the office on Monday morning to give me a call and let me know your story idea. Of course, that doesn't work so well in the winter because you can only go so far with red Converse sneakers in the wintertime.
And then you throw in the aspect of, and I'm sure you feel the same way, when we came into this program, when we went to get our whole preview on what this program would be, this is like, I just got a Facebook memory shared this week of us in Ottawa, Wakefield, Quebec, where we went for this like week-long seminar of what is
Yes.
the local journalism initiative. How does this apply to TV? Because I know a lot of people are familiar with how it applies to newspapers across Canada. I think that's been a little bit more publicized, how they're trying to make sure that these different newspapers across Canada, especially serving rural areas, and hopefully independent papers, but not all of them are, people know of that happening. But for us, for TV, it was a whole different venture. I got a Facebook memory of our group in Wakefield, and then we fell into COVID-19, right? Right, like 6 weeks into this program, you're trying to find the ropes of like, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do civic journalism for your community on this full-time level? What kind of shows are you going to start? And then a pandemic started that 2 years later we're still in. I just, weirdly enough, just did a COVID-19 update today, with the New Brunswick Premier and Chief Medical Officer. I just kind of finished that a couple hours ago, doing a live COVID update. So it's really weird to navigate that. So again, on that level, the weird thing is normally I'm used to like being known in your community for what you do, but because of CHCO being a part of these conferences and we've been broadcasting them and streaming them too, we've become known to a wider network in New Brunswick. So if I'm in Fredericton or Moncton or St. John, there's like a lot of strangers that like will wave at me now. Like, oh wow, they know us outside of our town. It's kind of funny how our little town and our community of Charlotte County, there seems to be a wider audience for it just because of COVID, but also because of COVID. I think that people, they have so many questions, and maybe it's made them rely on local news and independent news, especially a lot more, especially hyper local. Like if there's someone like you or like me in their community, they can go to for not just a story idea, but like a question for politicians or people in charge. Like that's what we've been trying to do, is keep our doors open that way. And I know what you mean. It can be a lot because people really can track you down because they know you. So,
they know where to find you. Yes.
Yeah, they know where to find you, but it makes you really accountable for like what you put out there, because I know if I'm not just going to hear about it in online comments, I'm going to hear about it at the grocery store and at the coffee shop. Like if people are happy or unhappy with what we put out there. So it's been such a weird curve, because I think we can't really take COVID-19 out of our time in the LJI, because it's basically at the same starting point that we started this program. We had 6 weeks where we were really kind of learning to decide on what program we were going to do, and then a pandemic hit, so you had to pivot all this, your initial planning, and deal with being a journalist on a very local level in a worldwide pandemic. So it's been a time.
It has been. And I mean, you had actually spent some time at CHCO before the LGI program began. I had never worked at Telile. I had done some one-shot things for them, mostly in terms of music as opposed to actual journalism. But my work in actually editing and putting together and producing a show started with the LJI program, and then literally 4 to 5 weeks later, all of a sudden I had to learn how to do my job all over again.
Yeah.
So that's where we were, but we're still growing and evolving in that regard. And actually, this gives me thank you, Vicki Hogarth, for the inspiration, because you have done such a great job of covering the COVID-19 briefings in New Brunswick. We at Telile had been simulcasting the Nova Scotia briefings on our airwaves for quite a while. But just before Christmas, I thought to myself, well, maybe I could do something similar to what Vicki is doing over at CHCO. So I started doing intros and extras and local analysis to the COVID-19 briefings here in Nova Scotia, just giving people an idea of where they could find local testing clinics and local vaccination clinics, and also explaining the breakdown of the numbers in terms of the various health zones here in Nova Scotia. And I was quite surprised at how quickly people took to that. I was getting a lot of people commenting on Facebook in terms of, well, could you ask this next time? Or could you talk about this issue next time? Or what did they say about this? And I actually got to the point where a couple of people were getting in touch with me and saying, is your COVID-19 briefing coming to YouTube soon? Because we put that on YouTube with the local analysis. So this was only a couple of weeks after I'd started, so my eyes popped open and thought, oh, okay, we apparently are making an impact here. But we're very grateful that we can do that for our local communities, that people will not only have a chance to see the briefing again, but to understand how it impacts them directly in their communities. And so Telile Community Television gives a big thanks to you, Vicki Hogarth, and all your folks at CHCO for inspiring us to go a little farther in our COVID coverage.
Do you want to know the real story of how this came about, how we did? So we do, for your viewers in Nova Scotia, what we started doing is we were in the COVID-19 briefings from day one. And you know what, there's not a lot of media in New Brunswick to begin with. I don't even just mean independent local media. There's just not a lot of media. So maybe for that reason, I don't know. And plus I've been around here for a while, and we're familiar with our politicians. So maybe that was part of it. I don't know how we were in from day one. But what happened is that we would stream it on Facebook, and we'd also air it on television. And sometimes, depending, I don't want to name names, but some politicians were later to the conferences than others. Anyway, what would happen is I'd be streaming it and I'd be following the comments, and we have a lot of followers on Facebook. So they would be saying, oh, when's it starting? Or is the screen frozen and all this stuff. So after a while, and this is my TV nerves for you, and I do thank the COVID-19 updates for that. I used to not like live TV before that. So I didn't want to do anything before the show. But because people were waiting, and sometimes it would say it was starting at 2:30, and every once in a while it would start at like 2:55 or something. I said to Patrick, our station manager, I said, why don't you just put me on and I'll engage with the audience. I'll talk about the numbers. I can talk about the COVID-19 numbers, do a little analysis, talk about questions that were submitted by the public, and maybe just give like a recap and maybe what I think that it's going to be addressed in that conference, that kind of thing. So we started doing that. Anyway, that way it engaged with people, gave them something to watch as we waited for the conference. And as soon as we saw the premier and chief medical officer walk into the conference room, we'd throw to the conference room and go to that video. So it just became this thing, but people loved it. And so, yeah, it's funny. Like last time I was in St. John, I was buying something at Roots, and the cashier was like, he's like, this is normally where I'd ask you what your name is, but I know who you are because I watched your pre-show. I never thought of it as a pre-show. It's more like how to kind of give people something to watch as they wait it to start, so that they don't think they're just staring at a screen that says COVID-19 briefing starting soon. Yeah, so it kind of became accidental, and it's really like given me absolutely no nerve now for live TV. It's been wonderful that way, and it's been 2 years. Who knew it would go on this long? But 2 years of doing that, and also 2 years of like, when you live those numbers and such every day, you really like, you can call to mind so much more than you ever thought possible. Like 2 years later, you've basically been tracking this virus, not just worldwide, but like on this like hyper local level too. So we've been talking about like, in the conferences, we've been making sure to represent it from our Southwest New Brunswick point of view too. So anytime I can ask about the Campobello Island, they had issues with, their ferry needing to be subsidized, because otherwise they only link to Canada through the US. Like there's a bridge that goes to Maine, and then they drive through for about 40 minutes or so. So, we were the first journalists and continued journalists to keep asking about that ferry and whether it could be subsidized, and it's still being subsidized by the government. But we've been happy to bring and it's also through that pre-show that we talk to people, because I follow the comments on Facebook too, and so I'm engaging with the public to see what they're thinking. So it's been, I don't know, I've absolutely, like, the silver lining to COVID. There are two silver linings to COVID and what we do. One, it's really taught us that we can engage in a way with our audience that isn't just them watching something on TV. We can add this like live element. We did have some call-in shows before, but we've added that online element to them too, that I think, to go to the next generation, you need to be multi-platform. So that's been really powerful. And I love feeling like this is not just a TV channel. It's like, it really is a community channel in that it's accessible, and it like includes the community in the programming that way. And then the other silver lining to COVID, this is like outside of the conferences, is that, like, for instance, just before this interview now, I was talking to the mayor of Grand Manan. I do a show called Your Town Matters, and it's interviewing mayors of Charlotte County, and that's something that was born out of the LJI. To really like hone in on like civic journalism, we thought we'd start a show that interviewed the mayors regularly from all the different communities in Charlotte County. So Grand Manan is, it's an hour-and-a-half ferry ride. It takes me 45 minutes to get to the ferry. Anytime I want to go, I need to go for the whole day. And it can't, you got to make sure it's not a bad weather day. There's a big snowstorm coming here right now. But Grand Manan just they're losing their bank. They have one bank on the island. So they're a pretty self-contained island. It's a pretty amazing place, but it is really far away. And now Scotiabank is consolidating their Grand Manan bank with their St. George bank, which is, the whole hour-and-a-half ferry away from Grand Manan. So this is a huge deal. They're trying to find a solution. But, prior to COVID, would we have had not just the technology, but would you have had the know-how of, like, every human pretty much knows how to use Zoom now. So, I called up the mayor and I said, can we do this interview? Let's get it out this week, because there's a petition going around to save the bank and different town halls and whatnot. So, of course she's ready. And then 5 o'clock, there's no setup. She knows even how to light herself in her house. It's pretty amazing that it's sort of made things that weren't doable before, or took like a trip, or people that weren't accessible before. Now it's really easy to include them too. And, like, yes, we are covering this very rural area, but it's pretty diverse. And,
Yes.
And Campobello was a challenge for me to get to too, because their ferry doesn't run every day. I couldn't drive through the States like I could before the pandemic, because you needed to be, we are essential workers, so I could have tried it. But the thing is, and the reason why we were pushing for the ferry so much in the COVID conferences is that if you do go through the States, even if you're allowed, you can't go to a hospital for, there's different issues that it creates. If you're just trying to access your doctor, you can't, things like that. So it's been, yeah, there's been some pluses. I don't want to make light of the pandemic, but there has been some silver lining to it in the programming it's allowed us to create and the way we do it.
I've said more than once that even if the pandemic had happened as recently as 10 to 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago, we would have all been in a lot of trouble because we're not nearly as plugged in, we're not nearly as online as we are. And in terms of
Right.
what you and I do for Telile and for CHCO, like you said, you mentioned an app like Zoom, it works out perfectly. And that actually brings me to one of the newer shows that we've been doing at Telile. We've been doing a panel discussion show called Roundtable since this past October. And it's the sort of thing where it's not always easy to get people from throughout our own diverse coverage area as well to be able to get together at the station in Arishat. And of course, it's even harder now because the station in Arishat, the building, is now open only by appointment. We're not doing any studio work at Telile Community Television right now. So you're very lucky, but we're not able to do that right now. We want to make sure everybody is safe in our own way. But by the same token, we have found even before then that it's not always easy to get the people you want to take part in a discussion to be in the same place at the same time. So we've been very lucky with Roundtable to be able to have something like Zoom working for us, because that means you can get three different municipal councilors from two different towns in a county to be able to all talk to each other at the same time. We had a wonderful discussion just before Christmas concerning settlement and immigration to Cape Breton Island, and about something that's been set up by an independent body by the Cape Breton Partnership, and it's called the Cape Breton Welcome Network. And there are individual welcoming groups in communities around Cape Breton Island, including some right here in our own area in Port Hawkesbury, Lewisdale, and St. Peters. So we were able to get four different people, including somebody who has benefited from settlement programs here in Cape Breton Island. She's from India. So we were able to get her and two of the community leaders and one of the communications people for the Cape Breton Partnership. He was coming in from Sydney. So we were able to get them all together in one conversation. And we're actually hoping to be able to continue those conversations and be able to have the newcomers being able to host their own show without me having to be the host. So we're hoping for that coming up in the weeks to come. But, in terms of the roundtable discussions, we've had, as I say, municipal councillors, we've had two of our municipal leaders, wardens and mayors, taking part in a discussion on affordable housing, and we've also had MLA panels taking part. I think we wound up with two opposition MLAs helping the finance minister for Nova Scotia, helping to write his upcoming budget because of our roundtable discussion. The circumstance and the technology just has to catch up to you at just the right time, and that's what we found here at Zoom. So we're glad to be able to doing that, and we're glad to see that you folks still put such a big commitment in terms of municipal politics and making sure not only do people see the municipal council sessions like we do here at Telile with Richmond County Council, but you're bringing these people into studio, you're connecting with them on Zoom and other platforms, and it's really inspiring and striking to see how well that you've adapted to municipal politics and how
Oh my
your whole crew at
gosh.
CHCO has as well.
Okay, in the past 2 years since we've been doing this LJI program, we've had municipal elections and we've had
Yeah.
a provincial election and a federal election. So we've managed, and I think we were the only riding, federal riding we did New Brunswick Southwest, where we had all the candidates this fall. We were spaced apart. We did it in St. Stephen, and we teamed up with the Chamber of Commerce in St. Stephen to vet questions from the public. And I moderated it. We did a whole 2-hour special with the candidates. Provincially, we did the same thing the year before. And then for our municipal elections, obviously we have a whole bunch of different communities to do. So we did the counselors too. We had counselor questions. Everyone had the same questions, same amount of time. So it was like a huge, and those are weirdly the ones that people are most engaged with. Like our provincial and federal stuff did really well online. And I like Facebook for those reasons, because I can really see the numbers of like who's engaging. But municipal, a lot of people said with the pandemic going on, it was the only way they really got to know their candidates, because they couldn't go door to door the same way. So it was really, the LGI for us came at the right time for our community, because we were really able to step up and take where there would be a situation where sometimes you're looking at a ballot and you're like, who are these people? Like, am I really just putting an X down? People felt like, and then you're able to put it both on television, on Facebook, on YouTube. So, you don't really have an excuse that you can't see it. You don't need TV. You can see it online. And same with the candidates. Like, they can't say, oh, I'm too scared to go in person, or I'm not available those days. Okay, meet me on Zoom then.
Yeah.
That's why I love Zoom too, because the politicians at all levels, like you're telling me you don't have 10 minutes for Zoom? Like, I can understand it's a trip to St. Andrews if you want to come to our studio and maybe you're in Fredericton or whatever. But Zoom, there's no excuses. How busy can you be? Right? So it's given us those opportunities to, like, say, write public health and say, I really need to talk to the chief medical officer about, at one point there was an issue where a bunch of people, back when we thought COVID numbers weren't high, there were outbreaks in our region. We wanted to talk to her. So she comes on Zoom and meets us there. We don't have to drive up to Fredericton or her come here. There's this like in between. So it's been helpful that way. But yeah, and now, speaking of elections, we have had municipal reform happen in New Brunswick. So we get to do it all over again.
Oh, dear.
This coming fall. It's okay. It's not every community. So I was talking to our Grand Manan mayor. They're being basically untouched, but a lot of communities in New Brunswick are amalgamating. So this is going to be, I never thought I'd care this much about like local politics to this extent that it's like really my like living life soap opera. But it's going to be a really wild time this coming summer and fall as we get closer to amalgamation. And it means that some communities are going to have to re-elect whole new councils. For instance, there's a town called St. George. So as I mentioned, that's where the bank from Grand Manan's bank is going to be part of St. George now. Well, St. George as a community is amalgamating with Blacks Harbor to become one community, and they both already have separate councils. We air both of their councils on CHCO and have both of their mayors come in regularly to Your Town Matters. And but this coming year, they're going to become one community. And I don't know, I'm like a little shocked at that amalgamation. So it'll be fun. I say fun, and I can't believe these are the choice of words I'm using, but really I get excited about this stuff now. So it's going to be fun and exciting to follow this process. And again, cover these elections as they elect new councils. St. Andrews will be amalgamated with so St. Andrews, where I live, is about 2,000 people. They're going to amalgamate with Bayside and Shamcook, which are two small communities outside of town. So there'll be another added 900 people. So it just means like we'll have some by-elections for representatives from those areas for here. So yeah, who knew this would be I would go from celebrities to this. These are my celebrities now.
It's Justin Timberlake one day, and then it's the mayor of Grand Manan the next day. So
oh my gosh, yeah. And it's funny how like your idea of celebrity can change based on your life. And now that I'm at this stage in my life that I'm at, and it's really important for me at this age. I think when I was young, I was like trying to figure out who I am. So it was really cool to go to Hollywood and or New York or wherever and meet people who really followed their dreams and were doing, big things on whatever scale. It was music, it was fashion, it was movies. Or politics even sometimes we'll get into, but now it's like, you're forging your own life and who you want to be. And so I'm in this stage where I love to see people really being pioneers in their community and creating a better world. It starts at that grassroots level. So they are my celebrities now. Like these are people, whether it's a small town or a bigger city, they're changing the landscape of where they live and they're putting their name forward to like take on a role and try to make their community a better place or try to navigate their community through COVID-19. So they are celebrities to me in the sense that like I'm really inspired by a lot of the people I meet, especially when they do it on a scale that is a small town, because you're not looking for that big spotlight. You're not looking for yourself to get a huge feature on 60 Minutes or whatever. Like they're really just doing it because they care about where they live. And it's also, I love New Brunswick because, and I'm sure Cape Breton in Nova Scotia is the same way, where, maybe you're not a lot of people, but I've said this a lot of times, like St. Andrews this week decided they're going to cut emissions by 30% in town by 2034. That's a goal they set at council this week. When you're a small community, you can set what might seem like a lofty goal to Toronto, but here it takes a very minimal amount of people to get on board with an idea. And so you can be leaders and change makers, and you can on a small scale do something that nobody on a big scale could do. So I'm constantly inspired by the people in the community I live. And I know sometimes people think it's funny that like I like to work on this hyper local level now, but it means so much to me, and it's so much more inspiring. Not that I want to like say that what I did before wasn't worth my time. I really enjoyed it, but this is like where I feel like I'm supposed to be right now.
I just wanted to pick up on a point you made about, being able to give these people the exposure and the special coverage and treatment. And I always went on the same premise with broadcasting and reporting as I did being a PA announcer for a senior league hockey team here in Port Hawkesbury years ago. And also being a PA announcer at the rink for junior B players as well too, and tournaments and things like that. I would always make sure that I was announcing their names crystal clear, doing it with enthusiasm, because it's a sort of thing where a lot of these kids and a lot of these teenagers and young adults may never make it to things like the NHL or even the Q League or even the farm teams. So let's make them feel like superstars right here in their own little rink in Port Hawkesbury at the McIsaac Memorial Arena. So that's the way I approach it with the people who I interview for Telile and the people that I've interviewed for years for journalism in this neck of the woods, partly because A, they deserve the same respect, dignity, and coverage that they would get in major cities and major markets, but also simply because these are people that are doing incredible things. And I mean, there was a real sea change in our last municipal election because we saw, first of all, in Richmond County, all 5 of the municipal councillors were defeated. They were replaced all by first-time candidates. That resulted in Richmond County get its first female warden, Amanda Mumberket. The mayor of Port Hawkesbury, which we also cover, Brenda Chisholm Beaton, is the first female mayor in Cape Breton, but she got some company in 2020 because the mayor of the CBRM, the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, including Sydney and several other small communities, Amanda McDougall, another Amanda, by the way. We call the eastern half of Cape Breton Amanda Land sometimes. But Amanda McDougall became the first female mayor for the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, which in itself went through its own amalgamation process in 1995. So we're really seeing some remarkable people doing some incredible things. And it's exciting for me to cover Richmond Municipal Council now. And I'm not saying it wasn't this way before, but I'm finding that we have a very articulate, thoughtful group of counselors taking part of these meetings. And it's one thing to say that you would take a segment of council and work at it and put a story together about it. And often I will do that and I'll put my own voiceovers in and analysis. But there are times that I'll just let these people talk for 7 to 10 minutes because they're making it clear what's going on. They're making it clear how it impacts the people of Richmond County, and they're making it clear why, if you're watching Telile 24/7 or any of our other shows, you should take 7 to 10 minutes and listen to these people. And I've had folks outside of the municipal politics circles just say to me on the street, I really like what you're doing, giving these segments of the municipal councils and boiling down what some of the issues are, because otherwise you're sitting there watching a 2 hour, 2.5 hour gavel to gavel council meeting. You're not sure whether you should be paying attention or not. I'll try to give the perspective and the analysis to say, here's why you should be paying attention. Here's why this impacts you. But a lot of the time, I can just let these folks talk and they'll tell the story themselves. And ideally, that's what we want out of journalism, especially at this community level, is for people to be able to tell their own stories.
Have you worked on any new shows this year, or do you have anything new in the works? Have you found it? I guess I'm kind of curious because it's been weird, this balance, right? Of like not over. Some days I do find this week, for instance, was a lot of COVID. A lot of COVID. We had I think how many I did four conferences, I think, this week, like just
Oh,
what,
wow.
so one a day, but an hour a day. And which is fine, but that hasn't been the norm necessarily this year, just at weeks when it's bad. So we've been in a bit of a lockdown in New Brunswick, and we're moving out of that this weekend. And then school's resuming on Monday. This is the Omicron wave. And, I'm starting to wonder if there'll be, there was a time when we thought maybe it's going to be over, but it looks like they're already finding a new variant called Omicron twin. I'm trying not to overwhelm my life with Omicron or the station with it. So it's this delicate balance. But then sometimes when you're in a lockdown, it's hard to, we've, been able to do, I did film 2 Your Town Matters episodes this week. And I'm trying to get a new show off the ground that I'm working on, and I'm going to keep it on the down low until I have it fully packaged to tell you what it is. So maybe we'll have another catch up soon. It's been challenging to produce new programming in the time of COVID, because not necessarily can people be in the studio and elements like that. So I'm just wondering what you have on the horizon or how you're navigating those challenges.
Well, we're slowly getting our way back. We have actually been able to use Zoom to our advantage over the last little while. I mentioned the roundtable panel discussions that we've been having, and I have to say, I grew up watching people like Peter Mansbridge and Wendy Mesley on the National talking with 4 or 5 different people and thinking, wow, that's cool. I wonder how they do that. So now it's surreal for me to figure out how to do that just using the right teleconferencing app. So that's worked out very well for us. We're going to keep doing that and keep doing those roundtable discussions. We're actually just about to launch a special series involving seniors in our community and several issues that pertain to them. We've been working with the Seniors Take Action Coalition here in the Strait area, and also talking to the Dr. Kingston Memorial Health Project in Lordways, Richmond County. So they've been working hard with us. So we're going to be having our first of those discussions in February, looking at the Strait Area Palliative Care Society, where we're going to look at everything from elder abuse to isolation brought on by the pandemic to various other issues that deal with seniors navigating their way through these lives that they're going through right now with the pandemic and with everything going very digital for them. But we're also continuing our work with Telile 24/7. We're going to be doing that weekly, and we're going to continue with our French language interview series Notre Côté, which has worked out very well in 2021. We're hoping to be able to keep that momentum going in 2022. And as we mentioned earlier, we're continuing with the COVID-19 briefings, doing local analysis at the beginning and at the end. And we're very excited about being able to work with summer students this year, which we didn't have last year, but also with training new volunteers. We're actually working right now with the Nova Scotia Community College and folks who do a broadcasting program for that campus, and coming in not too long from now to look at everything from cameras to lighting to green screens. You folks have a cool green screen, but we haven't, but we're looking at that very soon. So we're looking to basically build on what has worked right for us at Telile over the last little while. Our station manager, Becky Borino, is very active. She took on the role full time just a couple of months ago. She's been doing interviews with everybody from musicians to local personalities, and also folks like Mike Kellaway, our member of parliament for Cape Breton Canso. She just interviewed him not that long ago. So it's a real team effort at Telile Community Television, and we're happy to be able to keep that going. And I feel very lucky and very blessed to be a part of it.
I obviously, with my role, try to concentrate on civic, but then when you are a small station, you tend to lend a hand into every type of programming, or even you're a part of doing something that doesn't necessarily fall under the umbrella of the LJI, but we have all hands on deck. So we're trying to pivot a little bit so that we do have some joy in the community. So this isn't an LJI show, but we are developing a gardening show, especially because we don't really know with COVID if, how out of the woods we are, if we are even out of the woods, if there's going to be waves. So we thought a gardening show is a great way to we found that there's been a great connection that the TV station has played in COVID, where it almost feels like it's a meeting place for the community. And so with Facebook, we reach out, and so we have people sharing ideas and so we're going to be having different people from the community hosting different episodes of that and showing people how to do stuff. So it's something you could do on your own, but like take part in the show. So it'll be a little bit interactive that way. So that's something we're trying to balance out with, the heavy stuff that we do every day.
Yeah.
I just got a message from someone who said, "Oh, your channel's really heavy today," because we just did a COVID update. And then I just saw on television, we have a show about reproductive rights that's on. And before that, we had we have a whole show called NBWA, New Brunswick Response Action, dedicated to looking at systemic racism in the province. And we just had New Brunswick has the first, I believe it's the first in Canada, commissioner of systemic racism, who started her role this fall. So she was recently on our show. We have a whole show about systemic racism. And I guess and I would like to highlight that's why something like the LJI is important. That's not the kind of show you would find on another station, looking at something beyond, maybe like a news segment or something you might find on CBC or CTV or whatever. But here we have a show, that's what it deals with. And we have two regular hosts. One's the president of Black Lives Matter, and then Dr. Christie is an ethics director at Horizon Health, and they often have guests on. Systemic racism commissioner was their most recent guest. They're looking at doing some, I know it's Black History Month, February coming up, so they'll come up with some topics that might fall under, but I mean, for us, it's always on. It's not just because it's Black History Month. We have a show about systemic racism all the time that they host that wouldn't necessarily be something that a corporate television station concerned with profits would put on, because maybe, it's harder to sell ad dollars around something like that. Well, we don't have to worry about that here. Viewership, whether it gets a certain amount of viewers, the fact that you're putting a message out that's important is great. So I hope to build more shows like that. Going into this year, I'm working on a show that is looking at, this is the one I was telling you is top secret. I am working on a show that is looking at, and the nice thing is, again, with Zoom, we can have guests from all over. And hopefully I won't be hosting it. It's nice to sort of like help produce a show, but not be the host sometimes. So NBWA is a show where I'm not the host. And then this one I won't be either, though it's a panel show, like you've said, and it's looking at media deserts and New Brunswick in particular, and like what analyzing them from different points of view. Also in New Brunswick, we have the Irvings who own, Brunswick News. So they own all most of the English language papers in the province. They have, and some could argue that keeps in a province of 800,000 people, that they sustain some semblance of journalism but you could also argue, well, they control the message. So we're going to be looking at New Brunswick under the lens of a media desert with that show. So it's like just developing now, and I'm very excited about it. And I will be someone representing CHCO on that show, but I'm not the host, and that's all I'm going to tell you. The host is a really, really awesome person who is a huge background in TV and media. So I'm really excited for that show to develop, but I'll tell you more when it launches. You can have me back, because actually I think we will have guests and panelists from Nova Scotia too. So, it's definitely something that you could come guest on.
You recently took part in a major public forum regarding the media landscape in New Brunswick, and I'm glad you brought that show up, because I was really impressed that you were asked to come in for CHCO to talk to that panel, because you're right, there is a lot of concentrated media ownership in New Brunswick. I mean, we're seeing it a little bit in Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island too, with the Saltwire Network buying up a lot of the smaller local papers, everything from the Casket and Antigonish to the Cape Breton Post in Sydney, even the Guardian over in Prince Edward Island. So it's been really a concern for us here too. So I'm glad that you're speaking out in terms of this in New Brunswick, because the more voices we have being able to cover our local events, the better it's going to be for everybody.
Yeah, and that panel I sat on, actually, I mean, we had someone from Brunswick News, the editor-in-chief of Brunswick News was on that panel too, and it was representing all the different points of view, and that really spawned the idea for the show that we'll do at CHCO was just being a part of that panel and having that conversation. And they did ask me about the local journalism initiative on the show. They actually wanted to know about funding for CHCO. The guy who organized the panel is like quite obsessed with how we manage to pull this off. So, I mentioned that bingo, our TV bingo, and Telile's the same, is a huge part of our funding. And then I said, my salary comes from the local journalism initiative. And, you'll always get people that their first instinct is to say, oh, that's a government funded thing, therefore you must be a mouthpiece for whatever. And I said, well, actually it comes through a third party. So I don't owe my salary to anyone.
No.
And it does bring up the topic of whether these programs should exist. And to me, they're really necessary in Canada. You look at this huge country that's so spread out. The guy from Brunswick News, the editor Jackson, was arguing that, the market should determine, whether something should be sustainable. But I mean, I think even if you look at that through the lens of Irving, well, are they really doing newspapers because the market demands it and they really make money off newspapers? Or you could argue they're doing it because it controls the message. So there's that argument to make too. So is it really market demands? 2 days later or whatever, after that panel, they announced they're not doing their Monday paper anymore at any of their papers. So I think that the LJI brings up that important question of they asked me to what degree I would still be able to do my job without it. And I said, I would not be able to do it full time, or we wouldn't have been able to grow. We've been able to grow as a station because I was working here before the LJI, but I had another job too. And I still freelanced, and it was just Patrick and me that were the only employees. And since I've been able to be under the umbrella of the LJI, we've had another full-time journalist here too. So that's grown our programming immensely. We've been able, because there's 3 of us here, to really, hopefully we'll have more summer students this year. We had 2 last year, and we've built a student show out of that. So whenever people make that argument about, government funding, no, there definitely has to be a new way of supporting media on so many different levels. So, I mean, you look at papers that I used to love, or even magazines that aren't sustained because people expect to get stuff for free online. I don't know. So, and LGI is feeling that, it is feeling that hole right now where there's this deficit in media, like really good media, not just good media, but like really local media too. There's some really good media that is national or international in perspective. And so you lose that really like that beat on the ground that you need. And so much of the big stories and news come from the hyper local level. It's always reporters on, there has to be a reporter there uncovering the thing that's happening. And when you look at New Brunswick, I'm going on such a tangent here, I hope you're up for it. Look at like the mystery illness that that there needs to be reporters here looking at that stuff. That's outside of I've been participating in the news conferences about it, but it's like the Miramichi Moncton area. So I'm not really there to over investigate, or even like glyphosate spraying, things that, if there were more reporters here, people could look at. So that's one thing. Our new show, I'll tie this all back in together, like I planned this tangent. But our new show on the media desert of New Brunswick is going to look at, where things aren't being covered and what angles aren't being covered too, not just topics, but and where there are real voids and how we can fill them. I know in New Brunswick, like Facebook stepped up to, not Facebook the company, but Facebook the platform. A lot of people make their own pages in the community to share what news they know, and it's kind of, it's nice to see that they do that, but it's kind of sad to see that that's the reality in a lot of small communities, that they don't have anyone reporting on them, so they've had to find ways to do it themselves. So when people just Facebook, sure, but as a platform, a lot of people in New Brunswick have had to build their own semblance of a media outlet with a Facebook page. And that speaks to the reality of where we're living, and where we are is a different kind of reality, because you have CHCO, and then there is one non-Irving owned English language paper called the St. Croix Courier. So I think I said in this panel, I consider myself kind of like an anthropologist, where you're looking at a community that luckily I love too, and seeing if a community can be better shaped by having really present local media, and especially local media that's very independent, so that the community can also engage with.
That's a good way to look at it, as being an anthropologist for the different communities, because that communities are not the same, just as no one would say that Grand Manan and Miramichi are the same, or that Campobello Island or St. Andrews are the same, or that Woodstock or Shediac are the same. You also wouldn't say back here in Cape Breton Island that Arishat is the same as Port Hawkesbury, or Mulgrave is the same as Judic, or Budladek First Nation is the same as Dundee or Lower River inhabitants. So we're doing our best to be able to get out to these different communities and give them the due that they need. And one thing that I've really found that the television format helps too is that it allows the conversations to breathe a little bit, instead of what I used to do with radio and newspapers. Is that it's one thing to say that you're a good writer or you're a good broadcaster on radio or TV, but every so often it will boil down to plucking out the soundbite or the quote or the lead or the headline, or in some cases for the online forums, the clickbait. I like the idea that with Telile 24/7 and with the sister shows Roundtable and Cote, we're giving people a chance to talk and not feel rushed about it, and not feel that they have to say everything absolutely perfectly and it has to fit in this little box, and that if I don't give you the right phrase or the right nugget of something, then nobody's going to listen. No, people are going to listen, and most importantly, the person on the other end of the Zoom call or the other side of the microphone is going to listen, because I genuinely want to hear what the people are saying. And I know that's the case with you two as well, Vicki. So I'm glad that this program and Telile itself, as an entity, as a TV entity, has allowed me to be able to have conversations with the people who make the headlines and also are impacted by the headlines here in our communities. So I'm glad that you're able to do that as well too. That's wonderful. You had brought up the importance of bringing a little joy in with the heavy headlines, and there are a lot of heavy headlines these days. So I'm glad that you had that particular feeling in mind, because I want to wrap this up by looking a little bit at joy. And I want to talk a little bit about our executive producers at CHCO and at Telile Community Television, your dog Maud and my cat
Oh
Grace.
yeah.
They have been really, really helpful to both of us. I've seen wonderful pictures of you where you're doing your newscast in front of the green screen, and Maud is just right down there by your feet. So it seems like she's with you through
Let's
all the different turns of it.
let me see if I can get her to come in. Maud,
Oh, yeah, that's right. She's here
she's
now, eh?
here.
I can't get Grace because Grace is sleeping on a couch not far from where I'm
Wait,
actually
wait.
doing this. But,
I hear her. There she is. Come here, Goose. Come
oh, are
here.
we going to get to meet Maud this
Oh, come
time?
on up. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There's the baby.
The best friend a
He's kind of the
newscaster ever
best.
had.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I wonder if this would be okay at other TV stations. She's kind of like a mascot. So I read somewhere that someone said all animals have become emotional support pets in COVID-19, and it's kind of true. Like I don't know what any of us would do without her here. She kind of is our no matter what kind of stories we're dealing with throughout the day, she's sort of. And then we did a telethon at Christmas. We do this telethon for families in need, and I think we raised close to $70,000 this year. It was pretty incredible. But Maud was on the couch the whole time, and I heard from some people that they were watching it a lot for her.
Oh my goodness!
She's used to being on this couch. Yeah.
I did have somebody approach me about doing a show about dogs at Telile, so maybe that'll be the next thing for both of us.
You know what? I think I've often thought about getting a mod cam and like just seeing where she goes, but it would be a lot of sleeping.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
Well, often when I'm doing these interviews, my cat Grace is positioned literally right behind the laptop, and every so often a tail will poke up. I was talking to Nova Scotia's Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, John Lohr, a couple of months ago for a story, and Grace poked her head in and started nuzzling on the laptop, and he said, "Don't worry, I've got a dog here. I'm trying to calm the dog down." So, we love our fur friends for sure.
There was one conference she barked in, and she was barking at something. I think someone came in the TV station, and it was like right when I was off of mute and asking my question. But other than that, we haven't had any issues.
That's wonderful.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Adam. It's been fun to catch up with you once again on television. How weird that we do that. but it's been fun to hear what you're up to and tell
Look,
you a little bit about what we've been doing too.
this is business and pleasure for me, Vicki, and I want to thank you again for giving our Telile viewers a little bit of insight as to not only what you folks are doing at CHCO, but the many moving parts of being a broadcaster and being a broadcaster in a pandemic and in places like the Maritimes where there is a lot of media concentration, and it's even more important to get the community media going. And we're proud of you and Patrick and everybody at CHCO for what you do. You inspire us all here at Telile. So thank you again for sharing your stories and for sharing the stories of southwestern New Brunswick on the airwaves of CHCO. We look forward to seeing the next ones.
Oh, well, the feeling is mutual, and I watch all of your stories on the portal, that the Local Journalism Initiative portal, which is a great way, I think, for anyone who's interested in the program to go follow all the different journalists in all parts of Canada doing what you're doing, what I'm doing. I know I visit a lot, and it's just kind of fun to see how people are applying, the same program to their corner of Canada. It's really beautiful, and I love seeing what's going on where you live too, and you do a great job doing it.
That's very kind. Thank you so much, Vicki. And
All right.
listen, hopefully we'll do this all again sometime soon, but thank you very much for being a part of it all. It's been great to have you. This is like our anniversary. It's our
We
Wakefield,
may as
Quebec
well.
training anniversary and the anniversary of the LGI program in our various areas. So happy anniversary, Vicki Hogarth.
It's a good way to celebrate. You too, Adam. I'll talk to you soon.
And there you have it, folks. That wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thanks once again to Vicki Hogarth from CHCO-TV in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, for joining us to talk about community television. And if you'd like to see more of Telile 24/7, make sure you tune in next week for a brand new show as we kick off our third season. For now, I'm Adam Cooke. Thank you for tuning in, not just this week, but for the past 2 years. We look forward to starting a brand new season next week, and we hope to see you then on Telile 24/7. Bye for now.